Hey parents, I am Brant Gordon and want to welcome you to this episode of Shaping Arrows, where we offer quick encouragement and how-tos to making disciples in your home. And so we're excited this week to have John Truey with us. John is somebody that's actually been in my community group over the last season, and really excited about what God has done in his life and his family's life. And John has kids that have been in students and in kids ministry here at Mercy Hill. And so it's been cool to see just how they interact and lead them at different ages. And also it's been really cool because John has a lot of experience. His family has lived overseas in Southeast Asia for 12 years. And so he has a lot of experience in talking with people of different cultures and being able to engage the nations in different ways with the gospel. And so we're really excited to have you on this week with us on Shaping Arrows. And we're going to be talking about, the reason that you're on here is we're going to be talking about how do we help teach our kids about really the nations and engaging the nations with the gospel. And that's so important as parents to be able to do that, help our kids see that it's not just all about us and who we are in our little bubble, but that God is a God that deserves praise from all nations. And so, John, thank you for being here with us. To just get started, to kind of let everybody know a little bit about you, just share a funny or interesting story as you've talked with your kids about the nations. Share something funny or interesting from that.
Okay. And this is actually recently, if you came to our house right now, it wouldn't be uncommon for you to probably hear my kids to speak a bit of Urdu. And if you came to our house, you might hear my 9-year-old daughter say things like, "Tum kaise ho?" or "Aapka naam kya hai?" Which before coronavirus, we met a lot of people from Pakistan in a pretty short period of time. So I wanted to learn more about Pakistan and try to learn some Urdu. And when I say try, I really emphasize the word I was trying. I'm not doing well at it. But the point of the story is that, I think when my kids were hearing me try to learn that, and we would end up talking to our kids about Pakistan, we would go to the food truck and eat Pakistani food. And they heard it. And it wasn't something that we had to give them some big, long lecture about loving the nations, but things like that just kind of rub off, life on life discipleship. So yeah, it was kind of cool to see how they just walk around and say stuff like that now.
Well, for those of us that are not good with languages, there are things like taking our kids to a food truck that can still start these things. I think that's awesome. I think, as we do right now, we're in missions month and for family ministry. And so we're doing some MH Kids challenges each week with different things. And that's great opportunities to be able to teach them about specific nations, which has been pretty cool. And so I love that y'all are taking that on in terms of, going to a food truck, learn a little bit about a language, inviting other people, that are Pakistani people around you so that you can learn and be able to share the gospel with them. Man, that's super cool. So, man, what are a couple of resources that you would recommend that you have found helpful in y'all's walk as y'all have discipled your kids in this?
Yeah, I think for our family, the first one would be the book called from Operation World. It's called Window on the World. I know this is on the Family Resource Center at the Mercy Hill website. And just on a side note, if you're watching this and you have not been on, checked out the Family Resource Center, just go to mercyhillchurch.com. I think you hover over ministries, hover over kids, and then click on Family Resource Center. It's just awesome stuff. But yeah, for us, after dinner, we would usually sit down and we would read about people groups and about nations in Windows on the World. And we had this really old copy. And again, we wouldn't sit down and say, "Hey kids, sit down. You're going to learn about the nations." We wouldn't do that, but we would just try to make it as fun and interactive as possible. And I'm not going to lie, Brant, it was always during dessert. And so my kids were usually eating Oreos and drinking milk. And so I'm sure the high levels of sugar made it a much better experience for them. The second would be the study you can do with your kids. It's called The Journey. And it's actually, I'll try to post a link to it in the comments, but it's a 15-part study. It's meant to be done weekly. It's really good. It's interactive. It's got lots of questions. It's got fun challenges and activities. It's actually made for people who are going through the Perspectives on World Missions course, and it's for their kids. And the reason I highly recommend this is because it does this like really great job of showing how God's heart for the nations is not something that started in Matthew 28 with the Great Commission, but it's something that God's heart has always been for the nations from Genesis to Revelation. I think that's really clear in that study. So that's a really good one. And the third one is just, my wife made sure I would throw this one in there, is read missionary biographies. For parents, read them, but then also for your kids, like they have age appropriate biographies for every age. And so that's a good thing to do.
That's great. That's great. Man, just real quick, just to tag on to that, not to put you on the spot. I know we didn't talk about this ahead of time, but what are, man, if you had to recommend to parents, like, hey, these are like 3 or 4 missionary biographies that like you should start with your kids, what ones would you recommend?
I would say Amy. There's good ones on Amy Carmichael, Adoniram Judson, and Jim Elliott. That's probably the 3 I would say. Start
Okay.
off with those, just because it's different parts of the world, and their stories are just really cool stories.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Man, I think maybe a great opportunity for you as parents is to simply set a book like Window on the World at the table, so that it prompts you to have these conversations. We've been doing that with some different books, and so I think that'd be maybe a great idea for parents to be able to start that conversation of just having that nudge of seeing that book at the table, to enter into that conversation with your kids and your students. So, well, John, what's one action step that you would give parents? You would say, hey, this is one thing that you could do today, as you engage your kids with conversations about the nations.
Yeah. This is probably going to sound weird the way I say this or answer this, but I would say be a storyteller. Like, tell really great stories about missionaries, about different countries, about different places. And if parents like become learners about places, about cultures and peoples, then you can like kind of with your kids, like you take them on this like interesting and captivating journey around the world, which really helps them to frame other people, other places, and even like going to the nations like full time in a positive and winsome way. So I think telling these stories about the beauty and uniqueness of every culture is awesome, because it was always God's plan to have tons of cultures and tons of languages. It's God's story. And so when I think we lead our families in praying for the nations, or eating foods from different parts of the world, or bringing in friends from different countries, our kids can see that as not just like as an us and them kind of thing, like we're the insiders, everyone else is an outsider, but we really start to see ourselves, and your kids can see themselves as a part of a larger story that is God's story of bringing the gospel, bringing the good news to every tribe, every language, every people group. So yeah, that's probably what I'd say there.
Man, that's great. I think just like as you say that, it just reminded me of, we went on a missions trip a few years ago, me and my wife with a team to South Asia, and coming back and telling my then, I think my son was 2.5 maybe, and starting to tell him about what this place was like,
Mm-hmm.
the smells, the colors, the people, all of the different things that were there, and just what life was like. And he continues to, and he's 5 now, and continues to pray for the country,
Mm.
because we told him the story of like what it was like, and what were the stories that we were part of, there, and why we went there, and the importance of the gospel, going to the nations. And I think you're exactly right. We as parents have to expose ourselves to these stories by going on trips, or by reading, or learning ourselves, watching things and documentaries and things like that. And then we have to, pass this on, this life on life, like you were talking about, passing that on, to the next generation. And man, I think, what you're saying, I feel like is like we're seeing that in our kids' lives, and wanting to see more of that. And so
That's awesome. And I think another thing is like just like stories being in front, like they're hearing it, but like the nudges you were talking about was really cool. Like, and I think like throwing up a map of the world in their room or somewhere in the house, and like pointing out, what happened over there, what this country has, stuff like that. It's just keeping it in front of them is really good.
Man, I agree. I agree. That's good stuff. Well, John, thank you so much for being on Shaping Eras with this episode. Man, I think it was super helpful for me, super helpful for parents out there. And so, parents, I'd ask you guys, how are you engaging your kids, your students in the nations and understanding the nations and God's desire that every nation would praise him, every tribe, every tongue, every nation. And so, I want to encourage you maybe take some of these steps, investigate in some missionary biographies and maybe put a book at the table, begin, going around, going to a food truck even, and begin exposing your kids to the nations that they would see that the gospel is for all people in all places. And John, thanks again for your time today. Parents, I would, simply ask you this. If this was helpful to you as it was to me, I would encourage you, share this with other parents, that more parents would hear the life-changing truth of the gospel and how we can impact our kids with that truth in all of these different facets of their lives. And so we talk about each week that parenting, again, is not perfection, but there is progress to be made. And so thank you for being a part of this episode. And we will see you guys next time on Shaping Eras.